Welcome to the Movement Driven Podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger, where we help you bridge the gap between pain and performance. Each week, we'll share strategies, insights, and real-life applications to help you keep moving and stay driven. Now, let's get into this week's episode of the Movement Driven Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Movement Driven Podcast. I'm here with Dr. Greg. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dara?
I'm doing good. I am doing good. We are, gonna kind of continue the conversation that we had last week as far as baseball and spring training injury type things go. But last week we talked more specifically about the kinds of injuries that baseball players specifically can develop. This week we're going to talk more about that off-season prep to make sure that you don't have those injuries, or if they do happen, they're very mild and they're not setting you out for the rest of the season or anything like that. So, we talked about, how it really doesn't, April doesn't cause the injuries. It just exposes them.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So if your off season didn't build strength, capacity, and proper progress, that's where those problems are going to show up. So we're going to talk today a little bit about how to know if you were actually prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just start off with, is April the problem?
No, it's not. Like you just kind of put out there. It's more about what you're not doing during the off season to where once it becomes April or whenever the start of your season is. For high schoolers, it's typically more, in January, February, we're talking. But for the pros, it's now in March and April. But just whenever the beginning of your season is, if you're having these issues and arm pain and shoulder pain early in the season, it's obviously not that you're fatigued already. It's that your tissues aren't used to or resilient enough to support the loads and resist the stresses to where they start to break down rather than adapting. And so we need to give them proper time to adapt. And then when we kind of talk about later in the season, like we did last episode, where we are getting fatigued, and I think I mentioned this last week, it's this off-season training or lack thereof, that's a problem there too. Did you not condition your body ready enough to be prepared for late in the year, for the playoffs, for those, ninth inning, 2 outs? Can you get this pitch across the plate with the same amount of velocity without hurting your arm? Like we have to train for that from both a performance standpoint and injury prevention standpoint. So it's all about how you structure your off-season, what you're actually focusing on, and if you're putting in the work at that time period.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about what a good and bad off-season look like. Let's start with the bad off-season. What did people likely not do?
Well, I think the worst off-season is not having one. So we talked about this in Florida. I always recommend you need to take some time off from baseball. You don't need to play 4 seasons a year. You don't have to be on 3 different teams. You can take some time off and you're not going to fall behind. And I would argue, and the literature supports this, that if you take some time off and play a different sport, you're actually gaining more athleticism and more skills that will transfer back over. Soccer doesn't seem like it's the sport that has a lot to do with baseball, but if you think that your conditioning and your athleticism and your agility isn't going to improve for base running and infielding and if you're a catcher, like those skills transfer. And then something like soccer, you're completely resting the arm too. So there's lots of benefits for taking some time off. So my first piece of advice is have an off season. Now, during that off season, the first thing again is we need to make sure we actually just rest from throwing. We need to spend a good 6 weeks, if not 8 weeks, of not throwing pretty much at all. You want to throw the football around with your buddies, you want to throw a splash ball around at the pool, fine. We just have to limit how much we're slinging it and how. Don't be an idiot about it. I know with me and my buddies growing up, like if we weren't throwing the baseball, I was whipping the wiffle ball around, and then I was throwing the tennis ball, we're playing bird ball, and then we go through the football. And like, yeah, we're just kids being kids, but because of the stress we were putting through, we needed to kind of just go swimming or do go play soccer or just do some other activity rather than throwing. So take some time off, give your arm a chance to rest. Then during that time or kind of after that time starts, I want to have a big conditioning program and a big strength program where we're actually loading the tissues beyond what they're used to, putting on some muscle mass, start to Also, I think during that time, what's really important is mobility, making sure that mobility and range of motion is adequate. And then as we get towards returning to season, then we need to do more sports specific activities. And this is for all sports, really, that mimic and mirror what we're going to do this season, and doing throwing type drills and medicine ball drills and towel drills, so that we are putting stress at the right speeds and angles into those ligaments and tendons that tend to break down the most, so that we're prepared to actually start our throwing program once practices begin.
Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like, you know, the gist of it all is like, hey, play baseball, have your season, but at least have one 3 to 4 month season where you're either playing another sport or you have a specific conditioning program that is going to help you rest your arm, but also gain some strength.
At least 2 months. At least two
Yeah.
months. 3 to 4 months would be great, and I think that's definitely doable. But like I grew up and we had summer ball and we had fall ball, and then we had spring season, and then we had summer ball, we had fall ball, we had spring, and it seemed like that's what you're just supposed to do. And I know parents have the idea, well, if my kid takes some time off, they're gonna fall behind. And well, yeah, if they just sit on their butt and play video games for 3 months,
Sure.
yeah, sure. But if you're filling that with other positive movements and still conditioning and putting on some strength, and just like every sport, especially the other, if we're talking to other athletes like soccer or basketball, those athletes lose muscle mass throughout the course of a long season. So if we don't put on some muscle mass in the off season, then now we're going down below baseline level throughout the length of the season. If we revert back to baseball, if we don't have the hypertrophy and the endurance in these important stabilizer muscles, shoulder blade, posterior rotator cuff, then when we get fatigued later in the season, we're going to lose velocity, and then we're going to put stress more on the UCL or the growth plate for younger kids. And that's when injuries happen. And so we're trying to prevent that. But again, I mentioned this on the last one, the same exercises that prevent injury are the same ones that boost performance. They were one and the same. Rehab is, in my opinion, really good training, simply put. And so we can kill two birds with one stone, and do it ahead of time rather than waiting for the injury to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the, I know when we talked about what you should be doing to avoid a bad off season, and we get some good points for what to do during a good season, a good off season. But let's dive a little bit more into a good season and talk about like what that looks like. As opposed to, having the bad off season. And here's some advice: like you're wanting to have a good season outside of maybe playing the other sport and strength training, what are some other things that parents or the athlete himself, him or herself, should keep in mind?
Um, I kind of touched on it. I think mobility is huge, especially for adolescent athletes. You're going through growth spurts, and your bones tend to grow a little bit faster than the muscles and the tendons and other soft tissue. Those kind of have to play catch up. And so if we're not maintaining adequate flexibility, then we're going to put stresses on those tendons, because they have to attenuate courses that they're not used to in a shorter way. We've talked about length tension relationship and the importance of that before. But I think if we're talking specifically baseball players, we talk a lot about arms, but the off season needs to have a really rigorous leg program. Leg is where you get your power from, whether you're hitting behind the plate or throwing off the mound or just playing any type of position sport, and you want to increase your arm strength. It is all coming from your legs. So if you're not doing adequate glute strengthening, if you're not getting deep into heavy squats, if you're not doing band work, then you are missing out on everything that's going to gain you scouts noticing you and better performance, both batting average and hitting per power, and then throwing with velocity. All of that starts with a really good leg conditioning or strengthening program. And then the conditioning, a lot of people don't look at baseball as a sport where you need a lot of conditioning. You can be overweight and out of shape and play first base and just hit bombs, and you're going to get a spot on the field. But if you want to have the right amount of endurance that's needed at the end of the season to continue to hit the same way, throw the same way, and not risk injury, then you have to condition both cardiovascularly and from a muscle endurance standpoint your body. And so I don't need you running miles upon miles like a soccer player might want to, but I do need you doing sprints and plyometric drills to get your heart rate up, let it drop back down, hit in, high intensity interval training. So HIIT programming. That's what baseball is. Baseball is built largely utilizing your phosphagen system. We do big movement pattern, take a rest. Big movement pattern, take a rest. You swing, then you pause. You run the first, then you pause. So we need to train like that. So I want lots of sprints, lots of plyometrics where we're doing high intensity for less than 30 seconds and then resting for a minute or two. So that stuff's super important, and we need, and that's to me is part of sports specific programming. And then I kind of talked to this too. We need to make sure we're doing the right sports specific drills, i.e. for our pitchers. Are we doing towel drills? Are we doing medicine ball drills? Why? That doesn't just mean throwing a heavy ball as hard as we can. It means catching it the right way. A lot of time I'll be behind throwing it and I have to catch it this way to use all of these muscles to slow down the arm. This is something I had to mention. Most injuries, when they're actually happening within the motion of throw itself, it's not the throwing. It's once we let it go, our body has to slow down our arms so it's not just slapping us in the side every time. Most injuries across sports happen on that deceleration phase or that change of direction phase, not necessarily ramp up phase, other than maybe like an Achilles tear would be something that definitely happens on the push off. But almost everything else you see is a decel or a change of direction injury. And so when we're talking about baseball players, it's when they let the ball go, can the posterior chain, the rotator cuff, the scapular muscles like the lower trap, can those things do a good job at stabilizing and slowing down so we're not putting stress in weird places like the tendons and the ligaments and the joint surfaces. So we have to do a lot of eccentric training built in our program. And then back to the sports specific thing where I started with this point was the medicine ball has to be done the right way with the right philosophy. And so more than I can say in a 10 to 15 minute podcast, more than you can find on YouTube, you need to find somebody local that knows what they're talking about, that can help you and guide you through this process. Just like if the pipes and the electricity break down, you're going to go find a plumber and an electrician. I hope so for most of us out there, and not try to do it yourself. You need to find the expert for the things that you need in life. And a physical therapist is suited to be that expert, especially when they have experience working with overhead athletes and playing the sport themselves, like we do here at Movement Driven. We can certainly, with our experience of working with, not to toot my own horn, but I worked with MLB All-Stars. I can work on your 8-year-old. I don't mean that to sound cocky. I mean it to give you confidence in me that we're the right place for you to come with your child, and we can get them feeling better and throwing faster than they have ever before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, well, just piggybacking off of what Dr. Greg said, if you're in the Jacksonville area and you have a son or daughter who is into baseball and wants to get better and wants to help prevent as many injuries as possible, Movement Driven's the place to go. You can visit us online at movementdriven.com, have a discovery call with Dr. Greg to talk more specifically about your child and kind of what your goals are for them as well as what their goals are, and we can help you get there. So is there anything else you want to add before we close out today's episode?
I think that's it for today. I can't think of anything else.
All right, awesome. Well, Dr. Greg, this is a very informative episode. I'm looking forward to hearing some feedback from our audience on what they're thinking that they might do and potentially getting some new baseball minis in
There
here.
we go.
That'll be great. So thanks, Dr. Greg, and we'll catch you on the next one.
See you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the Movement Driven podcast with Dr. Greg Goldberger. Want to see how we're helping people in Jacksonville bridge the gap between pain and performance? Head on over to movementdriven.com. Until next time, keep moving, stay driven.